Sophia Bennett froze when her ex-husband Ryan Cole lifted his champagne and laughed loud enough for the ballroom to hear. Without me, she'd still be nobody. A ripple of awkward chuckles moved under the crystal chandeliers. Sophia kept her spine straight, fingers tight around the glass. Then the doors opened. The room shifted. Sebastian Vale, the tech billionaire everyone had been whispering about, walked straight past Ryan like he didn't exist. He stopped in front of Sophia, eyes steady, voice calm. "There you are." The crowd fell silent as he slowly dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that caught the light. Ryan's smile vanished. Sophia's breath caught, and the entire ballroom leaned closer. Without me, she would still be nobody. The words would come later, but long before that moment, Sophia Bennett already felt the weight of the room pressing quietly against her shoulders. The Grand Regent Ballroom in downtown Manhattan shimmered with warm gold light from chandeliers the size of small cars, their crystals scattering reflections across polished marble floors. The air carried the soft hum of expensive conversations, the faint clink of champagne glasses, and the subtle scent of sandalwood and designer perfume. Sophia stood near the edge of the room beside a tall arrangement of white lilies, adjusting the small event badge clipped discreetly inside her emerald dress. Technically, she was working tonight. The Bennett Arts Foundation Gala needed someone calm, organized, and invisible enough to keep everything running smoothly. Sophia had become very good at being invisible. 5 years earlier, she had been a different woman, one who believed love meant partnership, one who believed loyalty meant something permanent. Back then, her name had been Sophia Cole, and standing beside her at events like this had always been Ryan Cole, a rising financial consultant with a confident smile and the effortless charisma people trusted instantly. But that life had quietly unraveled, thread by thread, until the marriage, the shared apartment overlooking the Hudson, and the circle of friends who once filled their weekends had all disappeared into polite silence. Sophia exhaled slowly, steadying herself as a wave of guests entered through the double doors at the far end of the ballroom. Her job tonight was simple: check seating arrangements, coordinate the auction timeline, and make sure the keynote speaker arrived on stage exactly at 8 o'clock. She preferred it that way. Logistics were predictable. Emotions were not. Across the room, a burst of laughter rose above the soft music, drawing several heads to turn. Sophia didn't need to look to know that voice. Some sounds carved themselves into memory permanently. Still, her eyes lifted almost against her will. There he was. Ryan Cole stood near the bar, tall, relaxed, perfectly tailored in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. Beside him stood a striking woman in a silver gown, her hand resting lightly on his arm as he spoke to a small group of guests who leaned in with easy admiration. Ryan had always known how to command a room. The years had not changed that. If anything, they had sharpened it. For a moment, Sophia's chest tightened, not with heartbreak, but with something quieter, something more complicated. Recognition, memory, and the faint echo of a life she had already survived. She lowered her gaze back to the tablet in her hand, scrolling through the evening's schedule. There were still 200 guests to manage and less than 20 minutes before the opening remarks. Work. Focus on work. But the strange thing about fate is how it moves through crowded rooms with perfect timing. Because at that exact moment, as Sophia stepped forward to coordinate a server carrying a tray of champagne flutes, Ryan's voice cut clearly across the polished air of the ballroom, louder than necessary, confident as ever. And when he finally noticed her standing there, the slow smile that spread across his face carried the unmistakable look of someone who believed the past was still his to control. Ryan Cole did not look surprised to see her. In fact, the slow curve of his smile carried the casual confidence of someone who believed the room already belonged to him. Sophia Bennett felt the moment stretch thin as glass, while the surrounding conversations softened into a distant murmur. 5 years had passed since their divorce had quietly rewritten the shape of her life. Yet Ryan still stood exactly the way she remembered, shoulders relaxed, chin slightly lifted, the posture of a man who had rarely been told no. The woman beside him leaned closer, her silver gown catching the warm chandelier light like liquid metal. She looked younger than Sophia, effortlessly glamorous, the kind of presence that made cameras turn instinctively. Ryan said something to the group around him, then gestured lightly in Sophia's direction as though introducing a curiosity. Several heads turned. Sophia felt their eyes arrive before their expressions did. Curiosity, recognition, a whisper of old gossip. She straightened the tablet in her hands and stepped forward to guide a passing server toward the correct table, pretending not to notice the attention drifting toward her. For a few seconds it almost worked. Then Ryan's voice carried clearly across the polished floor. "Sophia Bennett, I was wondering if that was you." The small group parted slightly as he approached, the same confident stride he had once used walking into boardrooms and charity dinners alike. The music continued somewhere behind him, soft piano layered over the quiet murmur of wealth and influence. But his voice cut through it easily. It always had. Sophia lifted her eyes. Up close the years had sharpened him. His hair was shorter now, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper, but the expression was familiar. That same mixture of charm and calculation that had once convinced her he understood the world better than anyone else. "Hello, Ryan," she said calmly. Her voice surprised even her. It sounded steady, polite, professional. Ryan glanced at the tablet in her hand, and then slowly around the ballroom, taking in the event staff moving through the crowd with trays of champagne and polished smiles. "So this is where you landed," he said lightly. "Event coordination." The words were not loud, but the tone carried something sharper underneath. A couple standing nearby shifted their attention openly now. Sophia could almost hear the silent question forming in their minds. She had once been Ryan Cole's wife, the woman who attended galas on his arm, the one who helped organize fundraisers from the inside rather than the edge of the room. "Funny how life works out," Ryan continued, his smile widening just enough to make the remark sound almost friendly. The woman beside him had followed at a slower pace, her expression curious as she studied Sophia. Ryan placed a casual hand into his pocket and leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound personal while still allowing the nearby listeners to hear every word. "I always said you depended on me more than you realized." His gaze swept briefly across the ballroom again before returning to her face. "Without me, Sophia, you would still be nothing." The sentence hung in the warm air beneath the glittering chandeliers. Somewhere a champagne glass touched a marble table with a soft click. For a moment Sophia felt the old memory flicker inside her chest, the echo of a younger woman who once believed those words were true. But that woman had disappeared a long time ago. She met Ryan's gaze without flinching. Across the ballroom, near the tall double doors that led into the hall, a tall figure had just stepped inside, pausing briefly as though searching the crowd. And for reasons Sophia could not yet explain, the atmosphere in the room seemed to shift. The words lingered in the air like the faint echo of a closing door. "Without me, Sophia, you would still be nothing." Ryan Cole's smile carried the comfortable certainty of a man who believed the room agreed with him. Around them a few nearby guests shifted slightly, their expressions politely neutral, but their attention unmistakably focused. Sophia Bennett felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the old reflex that once made her question her own worth. For years she had heard those quiet dismissals disguised as advice, those small comments that slowly eroded confidence like water wearing down stone. But tonight something felt different. Perhaps it was the soft golden light spilling from the chandeliers overhead, or the steady rhythm of the piano drifting through the ballroom. Or perhaps it was simply the realization that the woman standing here now was no longer the one who had once believed him. Sophia let a calm breath move through her lungs and lifted her chin slightly. "That may have been true once, Ryan," she said gently, her voice even and unhurried. "But people change." Ryan chuckled under his breath as though amused by the idea. Beside him, the woman in the silver gown studied Sophia more closely now, her expression somewhere between curiosity and mild confusion. Ryan glanced briefly at the tablet still in Sophia's hand, and then around the ballroom again, his gaze passing over the waitstaff, the charity banners, the polished tables prepared for the evening's auction. "Change is admirable," he said smoothly, "but reality is reality." His tone remained conversational, yet the words carried a deliberate edge. "I built the life we had. I opened the doors you walked through. Without that, where exactly would you be right now?" Sophia did not answer immediately. Instead she noticed something else. The subtle shift in attention spreading through the room like a ripple moving across still water. A few guests near the entrance had turned their heads. One man whispered something to the woman beside him. Even the servers moving through the crowd seemed momentarily distracted. Ryan followed the direction of their glances with mild curiosity, though his expression remained confident. At the far end of the ballroom, just beyond the tall double doors, a tall figure had stepped fully inside. The man paused for only a moment as though adjusting to the light. His dark suit was simple but perfectly tailored, his posture relaxed yet unmistakably commanding. Several guests closer to the entrance straightened instantly, recognition flashing across their faces. A quiet murmur began to build, the kind of hushed excitement that moves quickly through rooms filled with powerful people. Ryan frowned slightly, sensing the shift but not yet understanding it. Sophia noticed the man's gaze move slowly across the ballroom, scanning the crowd with calm precision. Then, as if guided by some invisible thread, his eyes landed directly on her. The moment was brief, almost subtle, yet something about it felt unmistakably deliberate. The man began walking forward through the room. Conversations faded as he passed. A few people stepped aside instinctively. The soft piano music continued, but now it felt like background to something larger unfolding beneath the chandelier light. Ryan glanced toward the approaching figure and then back at Sophia with a faintly puzzled expression. "You know him?" he asked casually, though a hint of uncertainty had entered his voice. Sophia watched the man draw closer, her heartbeat suddenly louder than the music surrounding them. And for the first time since Ryan had spoken those words, she allowed herself a small, quiet smile. Ryan Cole followed Sophia's gaze, his expression tightening slightly as the man continued walking across the ballroom. The quiet ripple of recognition spreading through the crowd was impossible to ignore now. Conversations softened into whispers. Several guests subtly stepped aside to clear a path. Even the servers carrying trays of champagne paused just long enough to glance toward the approaching figure before continuing their route. The man moved with calm confidence, not hurried, not hesitant, as though he belonged exactly where he was. His dark suit fit with effortless precision, the kind of tailoring that did not need logos or embellishments to signal influence. Sophia Bennett felt her heartbeat quicken, though not with anxiety. Something steadier, something warmer. Ryan studied the man more carefully now, his earlier certainty beginning to fracture. "Who is that?" he asked under his breath, though the question carried a faint edge of irritation. The woman in the silver gown leaned slightly closer to him, whispering something that Sophia could not hear, but the brief widening of her eyes suggested recognition. Ryan's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. He straightened his shoulders, the way he often did when preparing to greet someone important. Yet the approaching man did not look at him. His attention remained focused forward, steady and unmistakably directed toward Sophia. The distance between them closed slowly, each step accompanied by the quiet murmur of curiosity spreading through the ballroom. Somewhere behind them the pianist changed to a softer melody, the notes drifting lightly through the warm air beneath the chandeliers. When the man finally stopped a few feet away, the subtle tension surrounding their small circle felt almost electric. For a moment he simply looked at Sophia, and the faintest smile appeared, the kind that carried familiarity rather than surprise. "There you are," he said warmly. His voice was calm, deep, and unmistakably sincere. Sophia felt the tension she had been holding in her shoulders ease slightly. "Hello, Sebastian," she replied. The name landed in the air with unexpected weight. Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly as the realization began to form. Sebastian Vale. The name had appeared in financial headlines for months, attached to bold investments, groundbreaking technology ventures, and a reputation for turning small ideas into billion-dollar industries. Several guests nearby exchanged quiet glances, the recognition spreading quickly now that the connection had been spoken aloud. Ryan blinked once, then forced a polite smile as he stepped forward, extending his hand with practiced confidence. "Sebastian Vale," he said smoothly, as though greeting an equal. "Ryan Cole, I have heard quite a bit about your company." Sebastian glanced briefly at the offered hand, but did not immediately take it. Instead, his attention returned to Sophia with gentle curiosity. "I hope I am not interrupting anything important," he said. His tone was polite, yet there was something unmistakably protective in the way he positioned himself slightly closer to her. Sophia shook her head softly. "Not at all." Ryan's hand slowly lowered as the moment stretched. Awkwardly, around them the quiet interest of nearby guests continued to grow, drawn by the subtle tension unfolding beneath the ballroom lights. Sebastian's gaze remained calm as he studied Sophia for another brief moment before speaking again. "I have been looking for you," he said simply. The words were not dramatic, yet the sincerity behind them seemed to shift the atmosphere once more. Ryan's confident smile faded by the smallest fraction, and suddenly the balance of the room no longer felt the same. The quiet murmur surrounding their small circle grew thicker, like the soft swell of an approaching tide. Sebastian Vale stood calmly beside Sophia Bennett, his posture relaxed yet unmistakably steady, while the warm chandelier light reflected across the polished marble floor beneath them. Ryan Cole had lowered his hand now, the gesture of greeting left unanswered, though he attempted to recover his composure with a measured smile. "Of course," Ryan said lightly, adjusting the cuff of his tailored jacket as if nothing unusual had happened. "Everyone in New York has heard of Sebastian Vale these days." His tone carried the polished confidence he had used for years in boardrooms and charity galas alike, yet something subtle had shifted beneath the surface. The kind of shift that only people standing very close could feel. Sebastian turned slightly toward him, acknowledging the introduction with a brief nod that was polite but distant. The attention returned almost immediately to Sophia. "I apologize for arriving later than planned," Sebastian said, his voice calm and clear above the low music drifting through the ballroom. The traffic on Park Avenue was slower than expected tonight. Sophia felt a faint smile tug at the corner of her lips. "That is New York for you," she replied gently. "Always unpredictable." Around them, several nearby guests were openly watching now. A few recognized Sebastian immediately, whispering his name to companions who turned with widening eyes. The tech entrepreneur had become a quiet legend over the past decade, a man known for building companies that transformed entire industries almost overnight. Ryan had followed those stories as well. Everyone in finance had. He studied Sebastian more carefully now, trying to piece together the connection forming in front of him. "And you were looking for Sophia?" he said casually, forcing an easy tone that did not quite hide his curiosity. "That caught my attention." Sebastian finally shifted his full focus toward Ryan. His expression remained calm, thoughtful even, as if measuring how much explanation was necessary. "Sophia helped organize the Foundation's early grant programs several years ago," he said simply. "Her insight shaped more of my early work than she probably realized." Sophia blinked slightly, surprised by the statement. She remembered those months clearly now, late evenings reviewing small startup proposals, when the Foundation still operated out of a modest office in Brooklyn. Sebastian had been one of dozens of young founders submitting ideas, his proposal thoughtful but far from certain. She had believed in it when few others had. Ryan's smile thinned slightly. "Interesting," he said, though the words sounded more cautious than impressed. The woman beside him shifted her weight, sensing the change in tone. Sebastian continued speaking with quiet sincerity. "When my company secured its first major investment, I always intended to thank the person who recognized its potential first." His eyes returned to Sophia with warmth that felt both genuine and steady. "I have been hoping to find you again." The surrounding whispers grew louder, now as more guests began noticing the unusual exchange. Ryan glanced around the room, aware that the attention had shifted away from him entirely. For the first time that evening, the confidence that had once filled his voice felt slightly out of place. Sophia met Sebastian's gaze, still processing the unexpected recognition. And in that moment, she realized something else had changed as well. The words Ryan had spoken only minutes earlier no longer carried the same weight they once did. The quiet buzz of conversation around them no longer sounded casual. It carried a sharper curiosity now, like the moment just before a curtain rises. Sophia Bennett felt the subtle shift ripple through the ballroom as Sebastian Vale's words settled into the air. Several guests who had been pretending not to listen were now openly watching. Names like Sebastian Vale did not appear at charity events without drawing attention. Ryan Cole sensed it too. The room that had once revolved comfortably around his voice had quietly realigned itself around someone else. He forced a relaxed chuckle, slipping both hands into his pockets as though the conversation were simply an amusing coincidence. "That is quite a story," he said smoothly, glancing between Sophia and Sebastian. "New York really is a small world sometimes." His tone remained friendly, but the slight tension behind the smile was becoming harder to hide. Sebastian acknowledged the comment with a brief nod. It can be, he said calmly, especially when the right people cross paths more than once. Sophia felt a faint warmth rise in her chest at the unexpected respect in his voice. For years, she had worked quietly behind the scenes of organizations like the Bennett Arts Foundation, helping young creators and small startups secure their first opportunities. Most of those founders had moved on quickly, their success carrying them into larger worlds where early supporters were often forgotten. She had never expected anyone to return and remember. Yet Sebastian stood here, now speaking as though those small moments had mattered. Ryan studied them both more carefully. The calm certainty in Sebastian's presence contrasted sharply with the polished bravado Ryan had relied on all evening. And the guests nearby could feel it. One older investor whispered something to his companion, nodding subtly toward Sebastian with clear interest. Ryan cleared his throat lightly, stepping half a pace closer as if reclaiming control of the conversation. Well, Sophia has always had good instincts, he said with a casual shrug. I suppose that is why she did so well supporting my early career too. The remark sounded harmless on the surface, but the familiar undertone was there, the quiet suggestion that her success had always been secondary to his. Sophia noticed it instantly. For years, she would have remained silent, allowing the implication to stand unchallenged. Tonight, she simply let the words pass by like distant noise. Sebastian noticed as well. His gaze shifted slowly toward Ryan, thoughtful but steady. Interesting perspective, he said after a brief pause. In my experience, the people who recognize potential before anyone else are rarely secondary. Ryan's smile stiffened almost imperceptibly. The woman beside him adjusted her posture, suddenly aware that the conversation was no longer unfolding the way she expected. Around them, the piano music continued drifting through the ballroom, soft and elegant, but the surrounding voices had grown quieter. Sophia felt a strange sense of calm settle inside her. The memory of Ryan's earlier words still lingered somewhere in the back of her mind, yet they felt smaller now, like echoes fading in a large room. Sebastian turned toward her again, the warmth returning to his expression. I meant what I said earlier, he continued. I was hoping to find you tonight. There is something important I would like to discuss with you. Ryan's brow furrowed slightly, curiosity overcoming his attempt to appear indifferent. Something important, he repeated slowly. Sebastian glanced briefly toward the center of the ballroom where the stage lights had begun to brighten in preparation for the evening's main presentation. Then he looked back at Sophia with a calm certainty that made the air around them feel suddenly charged with possibility. Yes, he said quietly. Something long overdue. The words lingered in Sophia Bennett's mind like a quiet bell echoing through a cathedral. Something long overdue. Around them, the Grand Regent Ballroom had begun shifting toward the next phase of the evening. At the far end of the room, the stage lights brightened slowly, casting a soft golden glow across the tall curtains and the polished podium waiting at center stage. A few event staff members moved carefully between tables, making last-minute adjustments to the auction displays. The low hum of conversation began to swell again, but the small circle surrounding Sophia, Sebastian Vale, and Ryan Cole remained wrapped in a different kind of silence. Ryan tilted his head slightly, studying Sebastian with the cautious curiosity of a man who had suddenly realized he might not understand the situation as well as he thought. Long overdue, he repeated, forcing a light laugh that sounded just a little too controlled. That sounds serious. Sebastian did not immediately answer. His attention shifted briefly toward the stage where the master of ceremonies was quietly preparing notes beside the microphone. Then he returned his gaze to Sophia, the same calm certainty in his eyes. 5 years ago, he said, when my company submitted its first proposal to the foundation, almost everyone dismissed it as unrealistic, too ambitious, too uncertain. He spoke without bitterness, only quiet reflection. The technology sector was already crowded with larger companies, and most investors preferred safer bets. Sophia remembered those nights instantly. The long evenings spent reviewing proposal after proposal inside the modest Brooklyn office where the foundation had once operated. She had read Sebastian's submission at nearly midnight, the small desk lamp casting a warm circle of light across the papers while the city outside had gone quiet. His ideas had been bold, maybe even improbable, but something about the clarity of his vision had stayed with her. I remember your proposal, she said softly. The distributed energy network model. Sebastian smiled faintly. That is the one. Ryan listened with growing impatience, glancing around the ballroom where a few guests were now openly watching their conversation. And Sophia supported it, Sebastian continued. Not with money at first. The foundation did not have the resources then, but with something more important. She believed the idea deserved a chance. He paused for a moment, letting the memory settle between them. When someone believes in you before the rest of the world notices, that kind of support does not fade easily. Ryan crossed his arms now, his earlier confidence fading into something sharper. People help startups all the time, he said with a small shrug. It is part of the ecosystem. Not exactly life-changing. Sebastian's expression remained composed. Sometimes it is. The pianist in the corner shifted to a slower melody, the soft notes drifting through the air while several guests began taking their seats near the stage. The evening's formal program was about to begin. Sophia noticed the foundation director stepping onto the platform, adjusting the microphone as the room gradually quieted. Sebastian glanced toward the stage and then back at her. I was invited to speak tonight about the future of sustainable technology investment, he said quietly. But there is another reason I came. Ryan's brow tightened again. Another reason. Sebastian nodded once. Yes. His voice remained calm, but the intention behind the words carried quiet weight. Because some acknowledgments deserve more than a private conversation in the corner of a ballroom. Sophia felt a ripple of anticipation move through her chest as the room lights dimmed slightly and the foundation director's voice began welcoming the guests to the stage. And suddenly the evening felt as though it was about to turn in a direction no one had expected. The foundation director's voice carried clearly through the ballroom as the microphone came alive with a soft hum. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight for the Bennett Arts Foundation Annual Gala. The room gradually settled as guests took their seats, the quiet rustle of chairs, and the faint clink of glasses fading beneath the warm glow of the stage lights. Sophia Bennett stood near the edge of the crowd beside Sebastian Vale, her heart beating slightly faster now as the atmosphere shifted from casual conversation to formal attention. Across from them, Ryan Cole remained standing as well, his expression carefully composed, though the earlier certainty in his posture had begun to erode. He watched Sebastian with the focused look of someone trying to anticipate a move in a game whose rules had suddenly changed. On stage, the director continued speaking, offering a brief introduction about the foundation's work supporting emerging innovators and artists across the country. The words were familiar to Sophia. She had helped write similar speeches for years. Yet tonight the speech seemed to glide past her ears like distant music because her attention remained on the man standing quietly beside her. Sebastian's gaze was fixed on the stage, calm and thoughtful, as though he were preparing for something far more significant than a routine presentation. After several moments, the director's voice brightened with clear enthusiasm. And now, it is my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker this evening. A visionary entrepreneur whose work in sustainable technology has transformed industries and inspired a new generation of innovators. Please welcome Mr. Sebastian Vale. A wave of applause swept through the ballroom. Several guests leaned forward eagerly while others lifted their phones discreetly to capture the moment. Ryan's eyes flicked towards Sophia for the briefest instant before returning to Sebastian, as if trying to read some hidden meaning in her expression. Sebastian acknowledged the applause with a polite nod before stepping toward the stage. As he moved through the crowd, the guests instinctively made space for him, their curiosity almost tangible. Sophia watched him walk beneath the chandelier light, the polished floor reflecting each step as he approached the podium. The director shook his hand warmly before stepping aside. The applause slowly softened as Sebastian adjusted the microphone and looked out across the room. For a moment he said nothing. His eyes moved calmly across the audience, taking in the rows of elegantly dressed guests, the foundation board members seated near the front, the investors and artists who had gathered for the evening. Then he began speaking in the same steady voice Sophia had heard earlier. Thank you for the generous introduction and for the work this foundation continues to do for young innovators across the country. 5 years ago, my company was little more than a concept presented in a small proposal. The room listened attentively now, drawn in by the quiet confidence in his tone. Like many early stage ideas, it faced skepticism. Investors wanted guarantees that innovation rarely provides. Yet someone within this foundation looked beyond the uncertainty and recognized potential. Sophia felt a subtle ripple of awareness move through the audience as Sebastian paused. Ryan shifted his stance slightly, sensing that the direction of the speech was moving somewhere unexpected. Sebastian's gaze moved slowly across the room until it landed once again on Sophia, standing near the edge of the crowd. And tonight, he continued, I would like to acknowledge the person who saw that potential first. The ballroom fell into a hush that felt almost electric as dozens of heads turned in the same direction. Sophia suddenly felt every pair of eyes in the room find her at once. For a moment, Sophia Bennett could not move. The quiet hush spreading through the ballroom felt almost unreal, as if the entire room had inhaled at the same time and forgotten how to breathe out. Dozens of heads had turned toward her now, elegant guests seated at round tables beneath the golden chandeliers, their expressions shifting from polite curiosity to open recognition. Sophia felt the warmth rise to her cheeks, but her posture remained steady. On stage, Sebastian Vale stood behind the podium, his gaze calm and unwavering as it rested on her across the crowd. 5 years ago, Sebastian continued, when my proposal first arrived at the Bennett Arts Foundation, it was not a guaranteed success. The concept behind our distributed energy platform sounded ambitious, maybe even unrealistic. Most early-stage investors saw more risk than opportunity. He paused briefly, allowing the memory to settle across the attentive audience. But someone inside this foundation took the time to read the proposal carefully. She asked thoughtful questions. She recognized that innovation rarely begins with certainty. A quiet ripple moved through the crowd as more guests followed his gaze toward Sophia. Ryan Cole stood only a few feet away from her, his arms now lowered at his sides. The confident smile he had worn earlier that evening had faded into something far more guarded. Sophia remembered the long nights in the small Brooklyn office, the stack of proposals spread across her desk while the city outside had slowly gone quiet. She had never imagined that one of those files would eventually lead to this moment beneath the bright lights of a grand Manhattan ballroom. Sebastian's voice remained steady and sincere. Many people talk about supporting innovation, he said, but true support often happens quietly. It happens when someone believes in an idea before it becomes fashionable to do so. Sophia Bennett was that person for me. The room responded with a soft wave of surprised murmurs. A few guests turned fully in their chairs now, studying Sophia with renewed interest. She felt the weight of their attention, but also something else rising inside her. A calm recognition that the years she had spent working quietly behind the scenes had mattered more than she once believed. Ryan shifted his stance slightly, glancing toward the stage, and then back at Sophia, as though trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the one now being recognized before an entire ballroom. Sebastian continued speaking, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone. Without her encouragement during those early days, my company might have remained an idea on paper. Today, that same company operates across 12 states and powers thousands of homes with renewable energy technology. But success does not erase the importance of where something began. He paused again, the silence in the ballroom deepening as anticipation built. Tonight, I wanted to acknowledge that beginning publicly. Sophia felt her heartbeat quicken as Sebastian stepped away from the podium and descended from the stage. The audience followed his movement with focused attention as he walked across the polished floor directly toward her. Ryan stood frozen beside her now, the earlier certainty completely gone from his expression. When Sebastian finally stopped in front of Sophia, the entire ballroom seemed to lean closer to the moment. He looked at her with the same warm respect she had seen earlier in the evening. Thank you for believing in something before the rest of the world did, he said quietly. And Sophia suddenly understood that the evening was not finished surprising everyone yet. The ballroom remained wrapped in a deep and almost reverent silence as Sebastian Vale stood only a few feet from Sophia Bennett. The warm glow of the chandeliers reflected softly across the polished marble floor, illuminating the circle of curious faces that had quietly formed around them. Guests who had moments earlier been seated comfortably at their tables were now leaning forward in their chairs, their attention fully captured by the unexpected moment unfolding before them. Sophia could feel the weight of the room's attention pressing gently against her shoulders, Yet the calm expression on Sebastian's face made the moment feel strangely steady rather than overwhelming. "Thank you for believing in something before the rest of the world did," Sebastian repeated softly, his voice sincere enough to carry through the quiet crowd, without the need for a microphone. Sophia felt the warmth of his gratitude settle into her chest, though her mind still struggled to process the sudden turn the evening had taken. She had spent years helping others succeed quietly, rarely expecting recognition, and certainly never imagining a moment like this beneath the bright lights of a Manhattan gala. "You are very welcome," she said gently, her voice calm despite the dozens of eyes watching her. "I only recognized an idea that deserved a chance." Sebastian studied her for a moment with quiet admiration. "That is precisely what makes your support so valuable," he replied. "You saw potential when it was still fragile." Around them the guests began whispering softly again, the earlier hush giving way to fascinated conversation. Some recognized the significance of Sebastian's words immediately. Others simply sensed that something rare was happening. Ryan Cole remained standing nearby, his expression frozen somewhere between disbelief and careful composure. Earlier that evening his voice had carried easily through the room with effortless authority. Now he seemed almost uncertain where to place himself in the unfolding moment. He cleared his throat lightly, as if attempting to re-enter the conversation. "It is impressive to see how far a startup can grow with the right support," he said, his tone carefully measured. Sebastian turned slightly toward him, acknowledging the comment with a calm nod. "It certainly helps," he said evenly. "But success is never built by one person alone." Ryan forced a polite smile, though the tightness around his eyes betrayed the tension building beneath the surface. Several nearby guests exchanged quick glances, sensing the subtle shift in balance that had taken place since Sebastian first arrived. Sophia noticed it too. For years Ryan had dominated every room he entered, his confidence shaping conversations before others had a chance to speak. Tonight the atmosphere felt very different. Sebastian looked back at Sophia, his expression thoughtful. "There is something else I wanted to say tonight," he continued, his voice still quiet, but carrying unmistakable intention. The murmurs in the surrounding crowd faded again almost instantly as guests leaned closer to hear. Sophia felt her heartbeat quicken slightly, though she was not sure why. Sebastian reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, drawing out a small velvet box that caught the warm chandelier light as he held it gently in his hand. A collective gasp rippled through the nearby tables as the realization began spreading through the crowd. Ryan's eyes widened, the last trace of confidence slipping from his expression as he stared at the object in Sebastian's hand. Sophia felt the moment stretch into stunned stillness as Sebastian lowered himself onto one knee before her, his voice calm but filled with unmistakable emotion. "Sophia Bennett," he said clearly, "I once promised myself that if my company ever succeeded, I would come back and thank the person who believed in me first. But somewhere along the way that gratitude became something much deeper. And tonight I finally understand what it means." For a moment the entire ballroom seemed to stop breathing. The soft piano music faded into the background, as if even the musician sensed that something extraordinary had just begun to unfold. Sebastian Vale remained on one knee before Sophia Bennett, the small velvet box open in his hand, the diamond ring inside catching the chandelier light and scattering it across the polished marble floor. The guests surrounding them stared in stunned silence, their earlier whispers replaced by a collective stillness filled with anticipation. Sophia felt her heart beating so loudly that she wondered if the people standing closest to her could hear it. This could not possibly be happening, and yet there it was, undeniable and breathtaking in front of her. Sebastian's expression was calm, but the emotion in his eyes was unmistakable. "When I started my company," he continued gently, "I believed success meant proving something to the world, building something large enough that people would finally pay attention. But over the years I realized something far more important. The people who matter most are the ones who believe in you before the world ever notices." Sophia felt the words settle into the quiet air around them. Across the room dozens of guests leaned forward in their chairs, captivated by the moment unfolding beneath the golden lights. Ryan Cole stood frozen just a few steps away, the color slowly draining from his face as he stared at the scene he had never imagined witnessing. Sebastian spoke again, his voice steady and sincere. "When you believed in my idea years ago, You did not do it for recognition or profit. You simply saw potential and encouraged it. That kind of belief changes a person. It changed me. Sophia felt tears gathering at the corner of her eyes, though she was barely aware of them. The woman who had once stood quietly behind foundation desks and late-night proposal reviews had never imagined her influence could echo this far into the future. Sebastian lifted the small velvet box slightly, the ring inside shining with quiet elegance. Over the years, I kept telling myself that one day I would return and thank you properly. But gratitude alone does not explain what I feel anymore. He paused for a moment, drawing a slow breath before finishing the thought that had clearly been building for years. Somewhere along the way, the admiration I felt for your strength and your kindness became something much deeper, something I can no longer ignore. A soft gasp moved through the nearby crowd as the meaning behind his words settled in. Sebastian looked directly into Sophia's eyes now, his voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. Sophia Bennett, will you marry me? The question seemed to hang in the air like a suspended note in a symphony. For several seconds no one spoke. Even the quiet conversations at the far end of the ballroom had stopped entirely. Sophia's mind raced through memories and emotions all at once. The years of quiet work. The difficult moments after her divorce. The words Ryan had spoken only hours earlier about who she was without him. And now this moment stood before her like an unexpected sunrise. Slowly, almost instinctively, she lifted her gaze from the ring to Sebastian's face. The calm certainty in his expression made the choice feel clearer than she ever expected. Around them the guests waited in breathless anticipation, while Ryan Cole remained silent beside them, watching the moment that would forever change the balance of everything he once believed. The silence inside the ballroom stretched so long that it almost felt fragile, like a glass sphere balanced at the center of the room. Sophia Bennett stood beneath the golden chandeliers while Sebastian Vale remained on one knee before her, the open velvet box steady in his hand. The diamond ring reflected tiny sparks of light across the polished marble floor, but Sophia barely noticed the brilliance of the stone. Her attention was fixed on the sincerity in Sebastian's eyes. Around them, hundreds of guests waited in breathless anticipation. Some leaned forward in their chairs while others stood frozen beside their tables, their expressions shifting between amazement and excitement. Ryan Cole remained only a few steps away, his posture stiff, his face pale beneath the soft ballroom lighting. For years he had believed he understood exactly who Sophia Bennett was. He had believed he understood her limits. Now he was watching the entire room witness a truth he had never recognized. Sophia felt her heart pounding gently against her ribs as memories flickered through her mind. The quiet office in Brooklyn, the stacks of proposals, the nights when she stayed late because she believed that ideas deserved a chance even when others doubted them. She remembered the years after her divorce as well, the moments when Ryan's voice had echoed in her memory telling her she would never succeed on her own. Standing here now, those words felt strangely distant, like echoes from a life that no longer belonged to her. Sebastian waited patiently, his expression calm and hopeful. The sincerity in his voice had left no doubt about what he felt, yet he did not rush her answer. He simply watched her with quiet respect, as though the decision belonged entirely to her and always had. Sophia slowly drew in a breath, feeling the quiet strength that had carried her through so many unseen moments. Then she smiled softly. Yes, she said. The word was gentle but clear enough to carry through the silent ballroom. For a fraction of a second the room remained completely still, as if everyone needed a moment to confirm that they had truly heard her answer. Then the reaction came all at once. Applause burst through the ballroom like a wave of celebration. Guests rose from their seats, some cheering openly, while others clapped with delighted enthusiasm. The pianist quickly shifted into a joyful melody that seemed to fill every corner of the room. Sebastian's face lit with quiet relief as he carefully slid the ring onto Sophia's finger. The diamond caught the chandelier light again, shining brilliantly now against her hand. He stood slowly and took her hands in his, the warmth in his smile unmistakable. Around them the applause continued, the guests clearly captivated by the extraordinary moment they had just witnessed. Ryan Cole did not join the celebration. He remained where he stood, watching silently as the woman he once believed needed him for everything was now standing at the center of the room. admired, and celebrated by hundreds of people. Sophia noticed him briefly through the crowd, but the sight no longer stirred the old emotions it once would have. Instead, she felt something far stronger. Peace. The past had finally lost its hold. And as the applause continued beneath the glittering chandeliers of the Grand Regent Ballroom, Sophia Bennet understood that her future had just begun.